Survival Doc here to talk to you about fascism in America. Many discontented Americans are claiming that our leadership is moving our country rapidly towards socialism. Well, to me, that's a foregone conclusion. But I believe that it is much worse than that. What we are rapidly approaching looks far more like fascism to me than socialism. According to dictionary.com, the word fascism means a system of government marked by centralization of authority under a dictator, stringent socioeconomic controls, and suppression of the opposition through terror and censorship. I checked various other sources and found pretty much the same, with the threefold common thread being centralization of power, oppressive government, and suppression of opposition. I did some further research and learned that the word fascism was coined by Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy from 1922 to 1943 and the most notorious ally of Hitler during World War II. Here's what the man who coined the word said about fascism. Fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism, because it is the merger of state and corporate power. Fascism, or corporatism, is when big government and big business are in bed together. The problem with fascism, as with socialism and communism, is that while the state looks after the interests of the corporations and the corporations look after the interests of the state, there is no one to look after the interests of the people, who are invariably the ones who get fleeced in the deal. And when the government or the corporations get dirty, as human nature ensures that they will, it is the people who take a bath. Isn't this what we saw with the recent bailouts of Wall Street? Many people believe that big government and big business are antagonistic to each other. But history shows us that big government has more often been the friend of big business, because big business has the power to help government officials remain in office and thus retain their power. Experience has shown that big government is more often antagonistic towards small business because the larger corporations can effectively influence government officials toward policies that are anti-competitive, making it harder for small businesses to compete on the same playing field as their Goliath counterparts. If you want to help small business, then put a constraint on the growth of government. What does it mean when the government says that a corporation is too big to fail? In a free market, there is no such thing as too big to fail. That's how a free market system works. Corporations are free to take risks, but they must also be free to fail. Otherwise, there was really no risk at all. If they can keep their profits when they succeed, as they certainly should, then they must take full responsibility when they fail, rather than rely on the government to cover their losses at the taxpayer's expense, or even worse, at the expense of future generations. Our system would not have been endangered if the government had taken a hands-off approach during the recent banking crisis. It is not a function of government to bail out failing corporations. Sure, there would have been some pain, but contrary to what we were told, it would not have been disastrous. With the actions that our government has taken, they have ensured that the crisis will be prolonged, the pain will be far worse, and the eventual end will be far more disastrous than would have been the case had they not interfered with the free market process. What the politicians really meant by too big to fail was that they felt compelled to protect the interests of those who helped them to get elected, so that they will be able to count on their support in the future and thus retain their positions of power. Folks, according to Mussolini, who coined the term, this is fascism, pure and simple, the merger of state and corporate power. The only thing standing between us and a completely totalitarian government is our Constitution, and that is why they are attempting to weaken it, a little at a time, starting with the Second Amendment, because an armed citizenry is one of the things that would-be dictators fear the most. Yes, we must be vigilant in this country against socialism and communism, but even more importantly, we must be vigilant against fascism, because that is our most immediate threat, and fascism already has its foot in the door. And why have we allowed this? Because during a crisis, fascism is always sold as necessity in the name of the public good. Ambitious politicians learned a long time ago that when the people are frightened, they are willing to give up some of their freedoms for a little security. So naturally it serves the interests of big government to keep the people in a perpetual state of fear. Is this the reason we have accepted perpetual war as a natural state in this country? It was Benjamin Franklin who first warned us about this when he said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." If you think that fascism can't happen to this country, then let us not forget that Hitler, the most notorious fascist in recent history, was elected by the German people through the democratic process. So how did Hitler seize total dictatorial control over Germany? During World War I, Germany had borrowed heavily to pay its war costs. After the war, the Allies required her to pay huge reparation costs. The German government, heavily in debt, decided to pay these massive obligations by printing huge amounts of paper money with no backing by gold or silver. By 1923, the greatest inflation in history was underway in Germany, with prices often doubling in a few hours. As a result, it took 200 billion marks to buy a single loaf of bread. Many Germans lost everything. The people were desperate for a savior. It was the political turmoil and economic chaos resulting from post-World War I hyperinflation that allowed Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party to seize control of Germany. What was to follow was the most oppressive fascist government and the most destructive world war that the world had ever seen. And what is our government doing today? Supposedly to get us out of our current economic crisis, which was entirely of their making in the first place. They are hyperinflating our currency, just like the Germans did. And how do they expect to get us out of a crisis by doing more of what they did to get us into the crisis in the first place? Remember, crisis is the friend of big government, because fascism is always sold as necessity in the name of the public good. If you think we have big government today, just remember this. Since we are not on a gold or silver standard, there is absolutely no limit to the amount of money that our government can print. We know from experience and common sense that he who has the money has the power. So it follows that there is also no limit to the amount of power that our government can amass. Our forefathers knew about the dangers of a central government out of control, and that's why we have the Constitution, to protect us from big government. That is also why our Constitution is being threatened today, because our government is out of control. Remember to be vigilant, because fascism already has its foot in the door, and during a crisis, fascism is always sold as necessary in the name of the public good. This is Survival Doc reminding you, be prepared or be prepared to be fleeced.